My name is Amanda Haynes. I'm a sociologist, and I want to talk to you about what this discipline, this subject, means to me. Sociology makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uneasy. It takes me out of myself, and it offers me a lens through which I can more clearly see the society in which I live, how it is organised, and my place in it. That's not always a very pleasant experience. I like to think that I'm a fairly self-possessed person. I work hard, I make my own choices. I'm really happy with where I am in my life. It would be pretty satisfying to be able to look at my achievements relative to those of others and credit them entirely on my talent and effort. But sociology isn't going to give me that. Sociology has made me sensitive to the fact that what I have achieved, where I find myself, the experiences that I have, aren't just of my own making. Yes, I put in the work. I made good choices, for the most part. I earned my qualifications. But because of sociology, I'm also very aware that I was advantaged in doing so by all of the financial, linguistic, cultural and social resources that my middle-class upbringing offered me. When I started applying for jobs, the competition was pretty fierce. It was fairly nerve-wracking waiting to hear whether my experience and credentials were deemed good enough to earn me that all-important interview. But in getting to that interview, I just had to worry about whether my qualifications were good enough. I never had to worry about whether my CV would be discarded offhand because of how my selectors had reacted to my address. Others who live in areas which are associated with high rates of poverty or crime have to concern themselves with that postcode discrimination every time that they make an application. My surname is not Irish, it's English. But in the far less multicultural Ireland in which I grew up, I spent a lot of time correcting people who mistook it for Hayes, so I didn't have to worry that my surname would identify me as an outsider. Yet in contemporary Ireland, the Economic and Social Research Institute have demonstrated that job applicants with Irish names are twice as likely to be called for interview as those with non-Irish names, even where their CVs are of the same quality. As you can see, I did get the interview and the job, and I'm particularly glad of that job and the security and the resources that it provides me in today's economic climate. Like everybody else, I'm feeling the effects of austerity, but I'm not bearing the brunt of it. The brunt of the cutbacks have been borne by lower income workers and those who depend on welfare, who are disproportionately affected by the slashing of essential services from which their private resources cannot protect them. By stealth taxes, which consume a larger proportion of their income, and by cuts to welfare and to the minimum wage. A survey conducted by the Credit League of Ireland found that nearly 50% of adults and 40% of working adults now find themselves with only €100 or less per month to live on after they have paid their essential bills. Sociology makes me uncomfortable because it highlights that my comparatively privileged position in life is not just due to my individual abilities or efforts, but also due to advantages conferred upon me by my group memberships, by my social class, by my citizenship, by my ethnicity. These group memberships, however intangible, open some doors and close others on the basis of where we were born, our family circumstances, our gender, the colour of our skin, or our sexuality, for example. And they impact our access to resources, status and power. As Socheolas and Plummer put it, in the game of life we may decide how to play our cards, but it is society that deals us our hand. Across the world, research shows that our destinations in life are very much shaped by our origins. Advantage and disadvantage are inherited from one generation to the next. The European Centre for Social Welfare Policy and Research has shown, for example, that in Ireland, children whose parents have primary level education or less are 75% more likely to attain no more than this themselves. Equally, children whose parents are employed in low-grade occupations are 88% more likely to find themselves in the same kind of job. The game is rigged. Sociology makes me uncomfortable because it challenges me to use this knowledge to do something to change the state of play. Sociologists do not see us as doomed to continue the trends that our research identifies. Quite the opposite, in fact. by revealing and understanding the manner in which the current shape of our society impacts our lives, sociology gives us the insights that we need to change things. Sociology turns a mirror on us. It helps us to locate the reasons for and to apportion responsibility for the way that things are, and reveals that the decision either to accept the status quo or to work towards change is an active choice on our parts. So I find that I can't just accept that this is just the way things are. Sociology prompts me to look for the mechanisms that produce and reproduce this way of being and to seek out the possibilities for change. So for example, I find that I can't take the current cutbacks at face value just because I'm told that they are necessary. I can't accept them without first asking myself whose interests they serve, how these cutbacks differentially impact the various groups that constitute our society, which groups are bearing the brunt of austerity and how that reflects the kind of society that we live in, the kind of society that we're creating. I can't ignore the fact that the household charges are presently the same whether you own a mansion or a cottage. I can't ignore the fact that the most vulnerable in our society have had the welfare payments on which they rely slashed, while the government has consistently refused to implement a higher level of income tax for the wealthy. I can't listen to the refrain that we have no choice in these matters, that our sovereignty has been taken from us, or that we dare not tax the wealthy for fear that they will abandon us, without considering that these explanations conveniently legitimate choices which widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots, between the powerful and the powerless. I find myself sensitized to the silences, hearing the gaps in the official conversation, the gaps between conversations about wealth acquisition, where considerations of equality and solidarity should be, the other voices. The finding, for example, that people at all levels of society, rich and poor, have a better quality of life in more equal societies. The argument by the venture capitalist Nick Hanauer that asking the middle and working classes to bear the wealthy's tax burden damages the equality, including the interests of company owners, by reducing the amount of money that people have to spend on goods and services. The acknowledgement that the IMF or ECB have not specified how we are to reach our repayment targets, and that the choices about whom we take from and whom we safeguard are precisely that, choices. When I view the management of our national crisis through the lens of the kinds of sociology that inform my work, I see it in terms of the exercise of power in the protection of privilege. And I see it not just as an economic crisis, but also as a social crisis, a crisis of solidarity, a crisis of society. Sociology makes me uncomfortable, but you know what? I value the unease that it produces. I'd prefer to be uncomfortable because my eyes are wide open than complacent and blind to what is going on around me. If you think that the kind of sociology that I've discussed today offers a perspective that interests you, please do contact the University of Limerick.